It's cliche that brother fought brother during the Civil War, but the Goldsborough brothers didn't just fight each other, one of them actually captured the other in battle.
The North against South. Brother against brother.
Years before the Civil War, it was already clear that the Terrill family of Virginia had widely different views of the issues between North and South. While William Rufus Terrill attended West Point Academy in New York, his brother James Barber Terrill instead attended the Virginia Military Institute located in Lexington. Their father, William Henry Terrill, had served on the board of visitors for the VMI, and needless to say, he was very much in support of secession. A third Terrill brother, Philip Mallory, left his studies at the University of Virginia to join the state's Confederate infantry when the war started. This put William Henry, James, Philip, and their brother-in-law George Potterfield on the side of the Confederacy from the very beginning. However, even though he was offered a commission in the Confederate Army, William Rufus declared his loyalty to the Union, a decision that was met with extreme consternation and anger back home. When he found out his son was contemplating staying in the Union, William Henry wrote to William Rufus that he would be a traitor and would be removed from the family history. Tragically, William, Rufus, James, and Philip Terrill were killed in the war, never having had a chance to reconcile or reunite. All three went to their graves as members of a shattered family. For many of those who were from the South but served in the Union Army when the Civil War broke out, there was an incredibly tough decision to be made: stay loyal or secede. While most decided to embrace secession and back their native states, others remained loyal to the Union. One of the men who had to make that decision was Union Brevet Major General Philip St. George Cooke. When Cooke decided to remain loyal to the Union, not only was he disavowing his home state of Virginia, but he was also creating a massive rift within his family. Cooke's son, John Rogers Cooke, chose to leave the Union Army and join the Confederacy when the war broke out. Even worse, from a family perspective, Philip's daughter Flora Cooke also chose the Confederacy, as she was married to the celebrated Confederate General Jeb Stuart. Stuart famously said of his father-in-law's decision to fight for the Union, "He will regret it but once, and that will be continually." While Stuart died fighting in 1864, though, both Philip Cooke and his son survived the war, later reconciling in the 1880s, just a few years before Philip's death. Few families were as entangled in the American Civil War as the Gibbons were. The Gibbons were originally from the North, but they relocated to North Carolina in the late 1830s. Fully embracing life in the South, the family eventually came to own slaves in North Carolina before the Civil War broke out. The Gibbon family featured no less than 7 members fighting in the Civil War, and only one of them was on the Union side. That was General John Gibbon, who defied literally his entire family to stay loyal to the Union. He graduated from West Point in the 1840s and joined the Union Army afterward. His slaveholding father was obviously in favor of secession, and all 3 of his brothers, 2 of his brothers-in-law, and even his cousin all fought against him as part of the Confederate Army. Gibbon appears to have actually faced one of his relatives, a cousin named James Johnston Pettigrew, at the Battle of Gettysburg. Pettigrew was taking part in the infamous Pickett's Charge, the disastrous Confederate attack that resulted in massive casualties, while Gibbon was on the other side defending against the assault. Gibbon was seriously wounded while Pettigrew survived the battle, only to die during the retreat.
He will survive the entire Battle of Gettysburg only to be wounded and then killed on the retreat home just as they crossed from Maryland into the state of Virginia.
While there were many families that fought on opposite sides during the Civil War, it was pretty rare to actually meet a relative on the battlefield. The story of the Goldsborough brothers almost defies logic. When the war broke out, William Goldsborough became a Confederate, while his brother Charles Goldsborough remained a Unionist. The 2 brothers would meet on the battlefield on May 23, 1862 at Front Royal. Charles was working as a surgeon for the Maryland Federal Infantry as they were fighting against William's Confederate Marylanders. The Confederates decisively defeated the Maryland Federals at Front Royal, and it was there that William took his brother Charles into custody as a prisoner of war. Luckily, their relationship does not appear to have been permanently damaged. After the war, the 2 reconciled, and they spent much of their final years together in their adopted hometown of Hunterstown, Pennsylvania, reunited as brothers. Of all the families split up by the Civil War, the Crittenden family is perhaps the most famous, or infamous. The patriarch of the family was John Crittenden, a former state legislator and U.S. senator. Crittenden played a big part in the political discussions leading up to the outbreak of the war, as he was the author of the failed Crittenden Compromise. The proposal aimed to avert the war by confining slavery to the South and keeping it illegal in the North. It never passed. One of the reasons Crittenden likely wanted to avert the country going to war is because he knew both of his sons would be involved. One of his sons, Thomas Leonidas Crittenden, stayed with the Union, but his other son, George Bibb Crittenden, seceded with the Confederacy. Their cousin, Thomas Turpin Crittenden, stayed loyal and fought for the Union. Both of the Crittenden brothers became commissioned officers during the war, with George becoming a major general and Thomas a breveted brigadier general. All 3 of the younger Crittendens survived the war, while John died of natural causes in 1863. Brothers Thomas and Percival Drayton's relationship was shattered by the Civil War. The Drayton brothers spent their childhoods growing up together in South Carolina, but Percival moved north with his father when he was around 20 years old in 1832, leaving his older brother behind. By the time the war broke out in 1861, the brothers had already been arguing over which side was right, and as a letter from Thomas to Percival shows, things were becoming pretty heated. In his letter, Thomas, who was a slave owner, makes it clear that the issue of slavery is dividing the brothers, though he takes exception to the idea that supporting the Confederacy meant battling for slavery against freedom. He rages against his brother for not seeing the North as the aggressors in the war, calling them traitors. Ultimately, Thomas would make brigadier general for the Confederates, while Percival became a naval captain for the Union. Unfortunately, they never had a chance to mend their relationship as Percival died in 1865, just months after the war ended. Perhaps the McBeaths family, more than anyone else, truly personified what it was like to be ripped apart by the Civil War. In the years before the war, brothers Anthony and William McBeaths lived at home with their mother and sister in Wayne County, Kentucky. When the war began, the family was split apart. William joined the Union Army, while Anthony joined a Kentucky unit for the Confederacy. Eventually, William received a commission and achieved the rank of a major in the Union Army, and both of the brothers returned home following the conclusion of the fighting. Yet, while William was proudly wearing his officer's uniform, Anthony's uniform was falling apart as the Confederates had been reduced to scraps.
While the South is left scavenging on the battlefield for spent rounds, food, even old boots.
Just the sight of Anthony looking so ragged was enough to upset their sister Susan, who wept when she saw him. For the McBeaths family, there were no winners and losers, as they all felt the pain of Anthony's defeat. But luckily, both McBeaths survived the war, a luxury countless families did not have. Born in the 1830s in Scotland, the Campbell brothers somehow managed to find themselves fighting against each other during the American Civil War. Arriving in the United States in the 1850s, James Campbell decided to live in Charleston, South Carolina, where his younger brother Alexander Sandy Campbell headed north to New York City instead. James later joined the Confederate Army while Sandy fought for the Union. Incredibly, they actually faced each other at the Battle of Secessionville in South Carolina in 1862. As the battle was happening, neither realized the other was there, and when they found out afterward, they were clearly conflicted. James wrote a letter to Sandy saying he never wanted to fight him again during the Civil War, but conceded they may have to if duty called. At one point, James even approached the Union line in an attempt to visit his brother, but was turned away by the officer in charge. In a letter to his wife, Sandy touched on one of the most salient parts of fighting your brother during a war, hoping to win while also hoping your brother, the enemy, survives uninjured. James and Sandy each had to fire at the opposing side, knowing his brother might be on the receiving end of the bullet. With no guarantee the other would not be in the line of fire, it must have been a gut-wrenching experience. Luckily, both the Campbells survived the war and remained close. The McLaughlins were another family that found themselves torn apart by the American Civil War, as brothers John and Henry McLaughlin were on opposing sides of the conflict. The family was originally from Indianapolis, but the brothers started to grow apart after Henry moved away to Florence, Alabama. While fighting the war, the McLaughlin brothers were reunited, but in the worst way possible. During the Battle of Champion Hill on May 16, 1863, John's Federals were taking on Henry's Confederates, and the Federals came out victorious.
By 11:30 a.m., the fighting on Champion Hill turned viciously hand to hand.
However, after the battle, Henry was confined to a Union prison after being captured by his older brother John. After his capture, Henry tried to plead with his Unionist sister that he was loyal to the United States like his brother, and she finally got President Abraham Lincoln to pardon Henry in 1865, after he'd spent more than a year and a half as a prisoner of war. It's unknown if the brothers ever reconciled. During the war, the Terrill family of Boone County, Kentucky found themselves completely fractured, with 2 brothers fighting for the Union and 3 for the Confederates. In addition, many of their cousins and extended family, including the Virginia Terrills, also found themselves fighting in the war, and many of them were split too. For the Kentucky Terrills, it was William and Robert who fought for the Union, while George, Joshua, and Simeon all fought for the Confederates. Only Simeon died during the war, with the 4 others surviving through the end. Incredibly, fighting for different sides did not seem to destroy their relationship, and they returned home after the war and lived without conflict. It shows how powerful the idea of family was for the Kentucky Terrills, who had a chance to heal that the Virginia Terrills never got. While most brothers engaged in competition and one-upmanship, James and John McIntosh took things to a whole new level during the Civil War. When the war broke out, James, the elder of the two, decided to leave the Union Army and secede with his native Florida and join the Confederacy. Apparently, it was James leaving the Union for the Confederacy that spurred John's decision to enlist in the Union Army, as he was working as a businessman in New Jersey when the war began. As a member of the Union Army, John achieved the rank of breveted Major General at the end of the war, while James would get as high as Brigadier General. Unfortunately, the McIntosh brothers were never able to reconcile. James died during the Battle of Pea Ridge in 1862, and the McIntoshes became another family tragically torn apart forever by the Civil War.